In a year that is stacked and diverse, full of rich and compelling games, in this year, our year 2025, it has been an incredible one thus far. We have now officially kicked off the final big stint that closes out the year, with new games fighting for your time and attention, and amidst the imminent big nuclear release that was Hollow Knight Silksong, came many other releases, one of which was Hell Is Us. An action game that taps into the puzzles and problem solving that feels reminiscent of something you would find in an old Resident Evil game. It is a game that has its flaws, but despite those flaws, gets many things right that you can't really find other games doing in quite the same way. There is a rich and compelling world here, a zero hand-holding approach to how it lets you loose in this world to explore. Hell Is Us is a game that feels rough around its outer edges, but at its core is full of heart. It has an atmospheric world, intentional design choices that mostly operate and interlock together to make a great whole of an experience. It has some components that feel like they may fall flat for sure, but I find many of its imperfections, weighed with what the game absolutely manages to nail, do make for an experience that feels unapologetic and charming in its own way. It is absolutely one of my highlights for this year, and it's a game that I reckon you should check out at some point in time. It is absolutely worthwhile despite many of its shortcomings, and I'm here to convince you why Hell Is Us is such a great game. So sit back, relax, and let's get into why you should at least put Hell Is Us on your radar. I'm going to kick things off by talking about the narrative for Hell Is Us, which is decent for the most part. I'm not going to sugarcoat it, this is probably one of the more weaker elements of the overall experience. It follows our protagonist, Remy, who is under interrogation by a strange suited figure. The story plays back through the events of Remy's journey, as he explores the world of Hadia, exploring and trying to put an end to the ongoing civil war and turmoil that has been plunging the land of Hadia into chaos. The narrative begins with a lot of momentum, but it is one of those stories that does start to meander around the middle of the second act, and the writing does feel hit or miss at times, with some dialogue that does feel like something you'd find in a schlocky action film of the late 2010s or a game of the early 2010s, something like that. It has its particular charm, but I do think in some areas it does come across a little bit cringy. Overall though, I do think that the story is quite captivating and interesting. It does have a great hook that really gets you intrigued and interested in the story, and I think your mileage may vary on how you find the ending and where many of the revelations come from. But that being said, there are a lot of strong moments that do come from the way the world Hadia is built, the different characters that you meet who represent each side of this conflict, the types of people you meet along the way and how they depict their side, and even the different towns. It's really bleak and depressing, but it adds a level of gravitas to the situation you are in and the world of Hadia more broadly. There is a good sense of mystery that is built around the story of Hell Is Us, and I do feel some areas I walked out satisfied, and I feel I was wanting a little bit more though from some of the more mainline story elements. But the interplay between the gameplay and how the game tells its story, its environment, and its people, it's one of the strongest points of the game's story. And there's a lot of lore and backstory here that unfolds and is told in a really interesting way, and that plays into a lot of the gameplay elements that I'm going to get into. I think it really does unfold and get this world ingrained into your memory in quite a different and unique way, and I really like that. It's very reminiscent of an old school kind of game, and I really found it quite satisfying, like picking apart its world and piecing it all together in that respect, more so than what the main story was kind of guiding me towards. But I think that different people will take different things away from this story and enjoy it for different reasons, or might feel a little disappointed depending on what you came here for. But overall, I do think the story has a lot of intrigue and good things going for it, even if it doesn't fully deliver on those things. But thankfully, the gameplay absolutely does. Hell Is Us's combat feels like it harkens back to an action game of the early 2010s, which feels like a breath of fresh air by comparison to the plethora of Souls-likes that generally dominate this genre these days. Here in Hell Is Us, you'll be fighting ethereal creatures called the Haze, who come in many different shapes and sizes. Your main challenge is that you face these enemies called limbic enemies, which are enemies that are bound to an elemental type of enemy that they summon. You will need to kill this enemy that is summoned that is attached to the enemy before killing that main haze enemy that it's attached to. And if you don't kill that enemy quick enough or stun them quick enough, then this summoned enemy will respawn, and repeating the process over and over again. It's a fresh and different idea that does make early hours of Hell is Us's combat feel fresh and interesting. The problem starts to set in around the halfway mark in the game. You've by this point seen all the different types of haze enemies, and the most that the game really has to throw at you is stronger variants of the same enemy types that you've faced. It makes combat bogged down to something that becomes more of a mindless affair than something that keeps you engaged, contemplating how to approach each environment, what types of hazes will spawn and appear in different areas, what effects might they have, which ways do I have to tailor my weapons or my approach. Like, it all kind of just becomes samey around the halfway mark. Another worthy point of mention is that this game has a small handful of bosses, and I can say, and can only be thankful really for that decision, because the boss encounters in Hell is Us are incredibly bad, and easily the moments of the game that I enjoyed the least. There is no spectacle to the encounter, no fanfare, and the mechanics of the encounter are abysmal in how you fight and how that fight unfolds. It doesn't posit any sense of challenge. The encounters just feel like busy work, and had they been removed, I would argue the game would have been better for it. Overall, in terms of challenging combat, if you are looking for something and you are from a Souls-like background, I feel you won't be hard-pressed here with Hell is Us. It is a pretty simple, flexible, and forgiving action RPG, but if you are someone who is looking for that, an action RPG, that allows you to utilize and customize cool abilities, and adventure through a dystopian world, then this might be up your alley. But now I want to talk about the aspect of the gameplay that I think absolutely shines, and one of the biggest things that really kept me going and really made me grow to love this game so much. That's the puzzles. The puzzles in Hell is Us are one of the game's biggest strengths, with a majority of these puzzles feeling like they offer a good level of challenge that is rewarding, and it takes you around this world. You're reading notes and logs scattered around. It makes the exploration of each different zone of Hadia feel much like a immersive sandbox that you're exploring and traversing. It provides an intentional approach to the layout and design of each location, making each discovery feel like a puzzle piece that guides and expands the exploration. The puzzles are also varied and do weave themselves into the history and the crafted lore of Hadia as well, which does help give you some added context into the more greater conflict that has been unfolding over the years. The puzzles themselves feel like they are a major component of Hell is Us's gameplay loop. If I was to break it down simply, it does feel like this game is split between a third-person action game and a detective investigation game, where you are piecing information together from different clues, conversations that you find in Hadia. And this side of the game I absolutely love. It is fantastic, it is incredible, and it is the part of this game that is absolutely worth experiencing, if nothing else. It really does feel reminiscent of those games of old where there was no markers, no quips from companions helping you solve the puzzles. It's just you finding information, things that are just written on the walls, piecing it all together and getting that sense of satisfaction when it all clicks together. The most you have here is a search tree of people that you can look at that has a collection of all the notes you've acquired, helping spark a eureka moment. What this approach ultimately culminates in is a sense of problem solving that feels satisfying and rewarding, and this is in large part due to how Hell is Us's no hand-holding approach to its world design is incorporated, which I'm going to talk more about later. But if there is one element of Hell is Us that absolutely stands out as well crafted, it is its puzzle design. The balancing act of revealing new clues, along with keeping the solution more a hidden in plain sight affair rather than something obvious that feels like an insult to the player's intelligence. That being said, this game did make me take notes like on a piece of paper like a few times here, and it did call upon me to remember a piece of information and piecing things together that I might have seen earlier, like a couple hours before. And it all clicks together in a way that if you are not used to this sort of experience, then you might get lost and find yourself backtracking a few times, trying to read over the same things again here and there, some messages on a statue or in another room, and trying to just have it click. But I feel like if you are like up for that sort of experience and you love piecing things together and like puzzles, this game is right up your alley and you should really check this out. This approach that Hell is Us takes is something that I feel like plays into the game's atmosphere, its world building, and it all clicks together to make the foundations of this game really something special. The first thing I'd like to talk about when discussing the different game systems that underpin Hell is Us is its approach and philosophy that the game takes towards exploration, world design, and overall its gameplay loop. This is what I like to call the no handhold approach, where the game withholds information from you and leaves the game up to the player to fully figure out and understand. It feels reminiscent of the magic that you would find from the exploration in a FromSoft experience, married with the puzzles and problem solving of a survival horror game like the old school Resident Evils. This philosophy is pivotal to the experience because the absence of a map markers, or a traditional quest log leaves the experience fully in the player's hands, allowing them to get fully immersed in the world. You were interested looking out for iconography, a building or a monument, and you were given a compass as well that can tell you different directions. It all makes the notes more worthwhile that you read, that you come into contact with, or the different people that you meet who convey different hints and points of interest are in the world. You know, something might be out west, so you pull out your compass and look in the west direction. You know, some puzzles might be saying like turn these things this way. You might also find, oh, that building, the lighthouse in the corner or something like that, and it might point you to that direction and have you look in a certain area. There's no map indicators, no map to really point you there, but the world is so clearly laid out with its intentional design that it points you and nudges you in the right direction naturally through the things you pick up, the people you talk to, and things of that nature that just make everything feel organic and natural. It really does just make interacting with the world feel worthwhile. It makes exploring the world of Hadia feel natural, and the discoveries and the atmosphere feel highlighted here and heightened because of this as well. It's a really bold decision that may leave some people getting lost, but ultimately what it achieves is a game that asks you to play on its terms and makes a world that feels like second nature exploring once you get your bearings. It's an action RPG that you can't brute force your way through. There are and will be roadblocks that aren't in the form of combat challenges like something in a Souls-like, like a boss. They're more meditative moments that underpin Hell Is Us. They're puzzles, they're things that you have to figure out. You're going to get lost in this world and look around for things that'll help progress and open a door, or, you know, open that treasure chest or get you to the next underground tomb, something like this. And those are the type of roadblocks that you're going to encounter, and I feel like they're very different to what compared to a lot of other games on the market. Now I want to talk about the more traditional progression systems that you'd find in Hell Is Us, and they are divided into two different parts. There is the underpinning mysteries and investigations and the way in which you explore, collect items, and complete good deeds that will reward you in turn. Then there is the more side progression that is very familiar. You'll be upgrading different weapons, assigning them particular damage types, along with leveling up its rarity, making it do more damage. You will also get different abilities for both your weapon and your drone. For your weapon, these come in the form of glyphs, and these abilities for your drone come in the form of modules. What these allow you to do is act out different abilities that go on a cooldown once completed. There is a good variety here of them, and I found that they were pretty cool and interesting to use, but I felt like after a while you didn't really need to mix and match them very much. It didn't really hit me or give me a drive. It felt like there was options, but it's one hammer fits all kind of thing. Like, there was no really different tools for different situations or anything like this, and that ties back into the enemy variety and the way to approach different enemies that I felt earlier. There are so many different enemy types like here, like there is a bunch of different types of haze. Ultimately, they all kind of wind up being the same. They all have these different elements, but you can take them down all the same. You don't have to really focus in on different attributes like any rock, paper, scissors types of things. There's never really a strong disadvantage playing the same way. So for most of the game, I ended up just using the same weapon. You never really need to brainstorm or change your playstyle. However, the way that you progress through both main and side quests, and along with this, side objectives called good deeds, where you help other NPCs, this method of progression does feel rewarding and satisfying, and it makes side exploration and also paying attention to random NPCs you communicate with in each environment feel interactable and worth listening to. They don't feel like fodder or just some random character walking by. There is like something that can be gained from just a random person. Not to mention that some of these good deeds can be failed as well, resulting in negative outcomes if they aren't completed in a timely manner. When I failed a few of these, I genuinely did feel bad, like I had failed too. It really got me hooked into some of these little side tasks. It is an aspect that I do feel will be making replaying the game an aspect that is worthwhile. Just seeing all these things come together, paying off all those good deeds, and getting people across the line. There is satisfaction in seeing these stories and these different characters you help as you progress. It makes a bleak world feel a lot less like so like sad and a bit more hopeful. And I think that's like one of the great things about Hell Is Us. But there's also these in-game progression rewards as well that tie back to the weapons and glyphs I mentioned earlier for completing these tasks. So you get both an in-game reward, but I feel the narrative impacts really do hit a lot more with this section. And I think that like I would love to see more of this if they do make a sequel. Like this system was fantastic. Now I'd like to discuss the visual, sound, presentation, and overall performance for Hell Is Us. I want to start with the visuals, and the retro sci-fi setting of Hell Is Us feels like it taps into many different forms of stylistic choices, from the brutalist look, the European vibes, along with some retro sci-fi that feels very like 80s sci-fi in its aesthetics, but it is able to take these different vibes and choices and really make its own world that feels unique and distinct. Hadia has a particular presence that plays into the more bleak and depressing themes that permeate throughout the game. There is also a lot of variation to the world of Hadia 2, with overgrown forests, cities engulfed in dust, buildings and bunkers and underground temples, and cities that are just really like war-torn and destroyed. There is so much variety in how these different landscapes and environments are constructed that further enhance the world building and history of this world that you are continuously reading about and hearing through both notes and discussions. The haze are also interesting in their designs, the presence and overall aesthetics as well. I do wish we would see more surreal and distinct variants of them, but conceptually they fit this world and overall the atmosphere of this world very neatly. Seriously, the environments and the world that has been crafted here is so well put together, and it is stylized in a distinct way that is both otherworldly and strangely human. It has been mentioned in an interview that Frextra Life had with Hell Is Us's director, Jonathan Jacques Bellet, that the cosmic horror vibe of Hell Is Us was inspired from what felt like forces that are terrifying, being real beyond our comprehension, referencing things like the radioactivity in Chernobyl and this like mystique and mystery that comes, and something that feels otherworldly about the horrors. As an example, explaining that the haze also are physical manifestations of human emotions, as denoted by the elements that are attached to them. The visual design and the way in which it depicts Hell Is Us's bleak and dire world is equally matched with its sound department, offering a pretty solid and all-round atmospheric soundtrack that contributes to making exploration, problem solving, and the moments in between feel atmospheric and meditative. The background music, that this depressing electronic synth of ambient tracks that play in the background, tapping into this feeling of investigation and exploring a world that feels like an oddity. It's bleak and hopeless. It really does sell and underscore the feeling of tension in Hadia, the urgency of your journey and investigations, and it is something that is always working in sync with the visuals. And these two components are always setting the mood and the tone and overall feeling of a particular area you are exploring, and it does so effortlessly. Another point that was mentioned in the interview with Frextra Life was how the soundtrack is about creating a mood and atmosphere. It really was the goal here, and much of Hell Is Us's soundtrack is inspired by films like Annihilation, and how the film's soundtrack blends horror tones with moody sounds. The voice performances here as well are really solid too. With the cheesy dialogue that I mentioned, I will put that as a quarrel I have with the writing, and that is something I have with this game, but I don't think it is an acting issue. I feel like Remy's performance by Elias Tofexis really was solid, and overall I think that the different performances here were pretty good. The performance for Hell Is Us has been pretty good from my experience as well. With the game, I've been running this on my 4080 Super and I've encountered none to very little hiccups. The most that I've had with this game is I've had a consistent frame rate the whole time, and the most technical bugs that I've had is some texture pop in like once or twice throughout my playthrough. I haven't really experienced any crashes, and there has been no in-game bugs or quest lockouts that I've encountered through my playthrough. Overall, making this a pretty easy pick up and play game with very little issues and fanfare there. Like, it's a very straightforward game to play, and I had minimal to no issues on the performance front. Overall, Hell Is Us is an experience that may look like something that you've seen before on its surface, but when you dig deeper, there is a unique offering here that is full of heart and charm. It's a game that may not be for everyone, but it's definitely something for me. It may be rough around the edges in some areas, but underneath that friction and roughness comes an experience that is a rarity and an oddity today. Its puzzles and exploration are as much a mystery as the inner conflict and plot that is unfolding, making you intrigued in what is going on around you at all times. And whilst the story may feel like it does fizzle out, the feeling of exploring the world of Hadia and its more micro-level stories that do unfold and depict such an interesting world and conflict. It tells a story and it's full of heart. The biggest sore spot to this experience is the lack of enemy variety and meaningful combat. It's not terrible, but it does feel more serviceable and decent than anything really special. If you are looking for a game with good action combat, I think that this game might let you down in some regards. But despite these setbacks, Hell Is Us is a worthwhile time. It is a game that is a unique experience and something that I haven't really experienced in a long time in a more modern video game, and I think that this will end up being one of the hidden gems of 2025, and for that reason I do think it is a worthwhile time and a game that is worth checking out. So with that all being said, I absolutely recommend checking out Hell Is Us at some point in time, because this is a great experience for those who like puzzle games, for those who like a nice atmospheric world, and for those who are just looking for a good time to get lost in an open world. As always, I am Tarrmu, thank you for watching, and if you enjoyed this video, consider giving us a like because it really does help out the channel. And if you really like this video, consider subscribing because I like to put out videos regularly and have a bunch of stuff on this, different content on this channel, and I hope you like it. So anyway, have a good one and I'll see you in the next video.